What that means is that I've got a lot of room for error, which I love when it comes to plant propagation because there are plenty of things that can go wrong. We want to try and pick all the things that can go right. So it's become apparent to me that after posting that previous video, we need a part 2. So I'll put a link to that first video up in the corner here and down in the description below, but it basically tried to answer the question, can I root my cuttings with potting soil? Very quickly, I got a ton of responses from you guys and the video started taking off, and there were a lot of comments either way. Some people telling me it was a bad thing to do, some people telling me that that's all they use. And so because we have such polar opposites going on here, and there are a lot of you who really are trying to understand this whole concept of medium, and this is the most asked question I get on this channel, I thought I would just tell you exactly what you want to hear. Here it is. Are you ready? You can use anything you want to propagate your plants. And I mean that in the most sincere way possible. You really can. You can use any medium that you've got on hand to root your cuttings. However, there will be some differences in the mediums that you're using. You will have some difficulties with some, you will have some struggles with some, and you will also have some benefits of others. And so, I hope that made sense. Yes, you can use any medium. Yes, you can use potting soil. However, you just need to know all the ins and outs of them. Personally, I don't like to use potting soil for cuttings that often unless I'm just having a hard time finding something and it's what I have on hand really quickly, and I know that the cuttings are going to root in it because I've tried it in the past. I explained why I don't like using it in that last video, but in that last video I got a ton of comments from you guys saying, hey, all I use is potting soil and I get great results. And it started getting me thinking, what exactly am I teaching on this channel here, Mike, and is it the right thing? Because, you know, I'm not immune to being wrong. As I thought more and more about this, I thought, you know, you can use potting soil for cuttings. I think the point I'm trying to get across is it might not be the most advantageous material. And here's why. Now, I believe that the reason people who struggle with potting soil is because they're waterlogging it. They're using too much water, or I guess number 2 would be because it's got fertilizer mixed into it, and that promotes fungal issues and bacterial growth, especially when you add too much water. I have a feeling that the people who aren't struggling with potting soil aren't waterlogging their soils, number 1, and 2, they probably don't use potting soil that has fertilizer mixed in. Now, I may be wrong about that too. And like I said in the last video, there are some cuttings that will do just fine in potting soil because they root so quickly, they don't have time to rot. But I wanted to add one more thing to that, and I didn't add it in the last video. I should have added that not only some softwood cuttings like basket type plants like that beautiful petunia behind me and fuchsias and things like that are okay to root in potting soil as long as you don't waterlog the soils. I should have also added that some hardwood cutting plants will root very easily in potting soil as well because they root very easily in anything, and that would include things like willow or figs or these mulberries we're finding out, and probably even grapes. So let's look at some different soils real quick and just kind of decide how each of these will work for you if that's all you have access to. So let's start with some potting soil. Now, if this is all you have access to, then this is all you're going to be able to use. Not everybody has finely ground fir bark like I do in my area. So there's some potting soil that I bought at the nursery last year. And you can see that it's not only got some coarse pieces in there, but a lot of fine material. And what happens is this stuff really just can pack down tight if you use too much water in that medium. And I've done this before myself. Now, the problem with this is no air can get to the bottom of that cutting, and it basically becomes a soupy mess. Now, some of you ask the question, well, Mike, what about the cuttings that I put in water? They're in a soupy mess. how come they don't rot? And that's a really great question that I don't have an exact scientific chemical process answer for you yet. However, I have a feeling it has something to do with anaerobic bacteria versus aerobic bacteria. I've thought a lot about this. I know we get cuttings to root in water, and we also get some cuttings to root in soil, and some cuttings will root in either water or soil, but why do they root well in water, and why do they root well in soil, and how does that work with everything we're talking about here when it comes to overwatering your potting soil? Unless I'm just missing something, rot occurs when you have bacteria or fungus eating away at that cutting, right? Well, if you just have a cup of plain water, it's not loaded with bacteria, and some plants do really well rooting in water. If you have a potting soil that is waterlogged, then you've got this soupy mess that's full of bacteria, packs down tight, some air can get in there, not a lot, but it becomes an anaerobic mess where you've already got bacteria, and now you're encouraging it to grow. That's just my theory anyway, for now. Maybe we should dive into that at some point in the future. So let's take a quick look at perlite. If this is what you've got on hand, then this stuff will work just as well. Perlite is a very coarse material that doesn't hold water very well at all. Over time it will soak some up, but it drains right through for the most part, and so it'll work well as a rooting medium. However, if you don't make sure that it's got some moisture in there, then it may end up drying out too quickly. And you don't want your cuttings drying out at all. So perlite would be on the more coarse end of the spectrum. And when I'm talking about perlite, I'm also including just about anything else that's similar to it that's coarse. And like I said in a previous video, you could probably get away with using plastic beads as a propagation material. That would be in the same realm as a perlite. It's coarse, it drains right through, doesn't really hold a lot of moisture, so you'd want to make sure that those cuttings somehow kept some moisture going on in there. Now this brings up a really good point about rooting mediums, and I'm going to try and relate these to the potting soil end of the spectrum, which would also include peat, because peat is tighter, it holds a lot of moisture, and it can get soupy really quickly. So you've got two ends of the spectrum. You've got your potting soil, your peat mosses, your coco coir, things like that are tighter and hold a lot of moisture. And then on the other end, you've got your perlite, your vermiculite, maybe even your sand. Although those granules are very small, it drains right through and doesn't hold a ton of moisture. So now you've got something that holds a ton of moisture and packs down tight, and something that doesn't hold a lot of moisture and drains really well. That is exactly how I arrived at my medium, my preferred medium, finely ground fir bark. Now I'm not going to belabor this because I've said it 1,000 times before for those of you who've been watching the channel, but finely ground fir tree bark is what I like to use, and I arrived at that originally. And by the way, real quick, don't think you have to use this stuff for those of you just arriving on the channel. It's not absolutely necessary. That's why I'm making these videos, to help you realize there's a broad range of materials that you can use. You just might have to use them a little differently. So when I first arrived at this stuff, I was looking for a medium that I could overwater, something that was foolproof, something that I could never have to worry about waterlogging, never have to worry about overwatering and rot and all those kinds of things. This stuff does that for me, similar to what perlite or sand or vermiculite or a coarser material might do for you. Now vermiculite does hold a lot of moisture too, so you got to be careful with that one, but it's got a lot of air spaces in it. So I put this stuff in my frames to root rhododendrons with. And now it works for just about anything that I do, but I really like it because it does have a lot of coarse pieces. It does hold some moisture, but it drains right through. What that means is that I've got a lot of room for error, which I love when it comes to plant propagation, because there are plenty of things that can go wrong. We want to try and pick all the things that can go right. This stuff is one of them. I can water it as much as I want to. When I stick those rhododendron cuttings in the frame, I can water them once a day in the beginning when it's real hot out. It's in August, something like that, and it won't overwater them. I don't typically water every day, but there's a lot of room for error with the medium that drains right through. And that's why I'm making these little videos here, because I want you guys to understand that yes, you can use potting soil, and a lot of people do because that's just all they've got access to. But if you can find something that drains a lot better, you'll have a lot more room for error. You're not going to be worried so much about rot. Now, if all you have access to is potting soil, well, then so be it. That's all you've got access to. Here's how I would deal with that. Wring it out really, really well. And I've done a video about this before. It's probably actually a couple of years ago. But if you have potting soil and you saturate it with water, in fact, I would recommend just doing that. Just put it in a tub or bucket or something. Put a bunch of water in, get it fully hydrated and saturated, and then grab it out of that bucket and wring it out. Squeeze it until it's just lightly dampened. That's all I would use. Here's why. When it's simply lightly dampened, you don't have to worry about all that water just sitting in there and making a soupy mess and contributing to anaerobic bacteria growth that will rot your cuttings. Now, this is where people get hung up. But Mike, don't I need a moist, humid environment? Yes, if you're dealing with softwood cuttings, then you do. But when you put that lid on, that clear lid, you don't have to worry so much anymore about it, because all that moisture in that medium is plenty enough to keep it humid. Planes, trains, and automobiles. The struggle is real. Now, of course, you don't want the medium completely drying out while it's in that tote rooting your softwood cuttings, but you just want to make sure that it's lightly moistened. Plenty of airflow. It's not a soupy mess. Of course, if we're talking about hardwood cuttings, all those rules kind of go out the window, and a little bit more of a soupy mess might be okay because it's open to air and it's going to dry out faster, and maybe that's for another video. And of course, then there's this whole thought. Let's just mix it all together and make a medium that drains well and holds moisture. And you can absolutely do that too. However, don't forget, you can still make a soupy mess even with that perlite mixed in. What I wouldn't mix together with potting soil or peat or something that is packed down a little tighter is sand, because sand are not big particles generally, and it will pack in with that other material, and it still could become a soupy mess. So that was a whole lot of talking about mediums. I hope you guys appreciate that one. I know some of you want these finer details. The bottom line is, yes, you can use potting soil for rooting medium. You can use anything you want for a rooting medium, but you'll probably just want to treat them all a little bit differently. Make sure that you're not having a soupy mess in your propagation area, your cups, your frames, whatever you're using, or that if you've got a coarse material, you do maintain some moisture down around that medium. So if you guys enjoyed this deeper dive, please let me know. Hit the like button, comment down below, let me know all your thoughts again. I really appreciate the going back and forth, and I actually learn a lot of things from you guys that are doing different things than what I'm doing here. So I hope you guys learned something. If you did, hit that like button just like I said just now. Have a fantastic week, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.